Gonna kick this off. All right, great. So thanks everyone. Welcome to the Deis Open Community Planning meeting for March. The first thing I want to do was start with a quick apology about last month. Some folks were out of the office and some signals got crossed, and we sort of skipped the meeting. So apologies for that. We did put a new process in place to ensure that that doesn't happen again. So you can be sure that we're going to have this meeting reliably every first Thursday of the month. Today we got some stuff to talk about. The agenda was posted on the Deis users mailing list, and we are, I do encourage folks to ask questions throughout in chat. I think is a pretty effective way of doing that. And I think we're going to kick it off with Matt Boersma talking about the status of the LTS release for Deis V1.
Hey everybody, can you guys hear me okay? Cool. So let's talk about Deis version 1 on CoreOS. You've all probably noticed that, the hyper development activity that we've always had has slowed down finally a little bit, although our download rate has definitely not. There's still a staggering number of people who are downloading Deis version 1 all the time and trying it out. So hopefully you've also noticed that, development activity might have slowed down, but really it's just gotten more focused on fixing the important bugs that we know about, updating the libraries and the tools so that everything is relatively current and benefiting from current open source bug fixes, and patching any security issues that come up, as we will continue to do in perpetuity for Deis version 1. So the long-term support release that we've been talking about is all about keeping that Deis download count trucking. As long as people find Deis on CoreOS useful, we're going to keep supporting it and making it available. And the other goal is obviously ensuring that all of you who are using Deis version 1 are still productive as long as you need to be. So in February, we failed to have this meeting, but we did have a 1.12.3 bug fix release, which is essentially just for an OpenSSL vulnerability that CoreOS found and fixed. Well, they didn't find it, but they fixed it in their distro. 1.12.3 has been a pretty solid platform for everybody as far as we can tell. We've seen a couple bugs come in, but they're nothing new to that. But there are a lot of improvements in master that aren't in there yet, so that's what LTS is going to be. As you might have noticed if you've been paying attention to what we're doing, Deis version 2 on Kubernetes is just going great. We've been doing a lot of refactoring, moving the code around, throwing things away, in some cases relative to Deis version 1. While we've been doing that, we've also found a fair number of bugs and improvements that apply to both code bases. Sorry, are we having communication problems? No? Okay, I'll keep going. Anyway, the bug fixes that we found in Deis version 2 development, we've been backporting them wherever they're applicable into Deis version 1. And that's part of the LTS kind of promise, is we're going to continue to do that. Whenever there's a bug fix we find and it's applicable to version 1, we're going to move it back there. We've also removed a little bit of what we essentially is cruft now that we've decided not to go forward with the scheduler previews that were in there. So Deis version 1.13, the LTS release won't have the preview schedulers for Swarm, Mesos, or Kubernetes. Just makes the code base a little smaller, easier for us to manage and support. So it's still, our core scheduler fleet on CoreOS that you're used to. And basically, as Deis version 2 is entering beta, and you're going to hear about it a little later from Jason, we're going to also start final testing of Deis version 1 LTS, and we intend to release that this month. There's still 33 issues, I think, attached to that milestone that we need to deal with, but it's tractable, and we'll get it done this month. You can help us out, obviously, by if there are any dangling issues that you think you could fix or help us test, we would love that. Or just making sure that we're on the right track and we haven't missed anything. That big issue, rolling up all the things we want to put in version 1, is still out there. Here, I posted in chat. So if you're worried about anything not making it in the LTS release, make sure it's on that issue right there. Yeah, and that's basically it for LTS. Does anybody have any questions about that? Cool. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Jason Hansen, who's going to talk about Deis version 2 update.
Okie dokie. Gabe, if you. All right, terminal. We've got terminal. Whee! All right, we're rapidly making progress toward beta, and I'll talk about a couple of the things that we need to have done before we're willing to cut beta. But I wanted to show the current state of the platform. Where we picked up from last January, we had implemented the build pack workflow, and and we still had etcd as part of the cluster. So one of the things I want to call out here, we have the standard complement of services, Deis Builder, Deis Database, Minio, which provides object storage on cluster. Also support off-cluster object storage. The registry that everyone's familiar with, Deis Router for edge routing, and then Workflow, which is the old controller component. Here we have the set of Kubernetes or replication controllers that maintain all of the Deis platform services, and then each of the individual pods themselves. So slimmed down over what you saw in January with the notable absence of etcd. And of course, one of the major changes from V1 is no Ceph itself. So we're using Minio for dev and test, and then off cluster for persistence. So as we showed, so I'm currently logged in, create. So this is a build pack based application. One of the things I want to show you here is space. On the right-hand side, for every application that we create, for those who haven't been following along on the V2 stuff, we create a dedicated namespace. And when we push this application, we'll create a service, and that service will get a replication controller for each of the releases. So if I git push Deis master, it will detect the Go app, and as soon as it finishes the slug build, it'll go ahead and create the namespace since this is the initial push. So if I, now you can see that the service has been created. We have a concrete service address for this application, which is the address that the router component will route HTTP traffic to. We've got, sorry about the line wrap here, but we've got, for V2 release of the app, we've got that using Slug Runner and then one pod. So if we scale to web equals 5, the workflow component will use underlying Kubernetes system, set the replica count to 5, and automatically spin up all of the pods. So as those are scaling up, you can now see that the process lists map to the underlying pod. So when we curl this, you can see that the host names change reflective of the pod that serviced the request. So as well, Deis config set by equals configuration changes, create a new release. It's a very familiar territory. The way that we roll this out is by creating a new replication controller, which references the new release, and then decrement the replica count for the old version and increase the replica count for the new version. This also waits for all associated health checks if configured to pass. So you'll see pods become running and then go ready, and then we'll move on to the next pod until the rolling update is complete. So as this continues, you can see here that we're the V3s are taking over the V2s. And last but not least, okie doke. So now you can see that, configuration has been updated. Beta also has support for Docker file. So Deis create, just like with build packs, git push Deis master. This launches, which I didn't show earlier, but it'll launch a Docker builder pod in the Deis namespace, which manages the container build. And you can see here that the image for this release is hosted on the internal Deis registry tagged with the git SHA of the push. So this scale is just like everything else. Deis scale cmd equals 3, for example. Increment the replica count, so on and so forth. Same thing with configuration sets, works for Docker file-based applications, just like you would expect. All right, and last but not least, Deis create remote. We support referencing remote Docker images, so Deis pull Deis example go, for example. Oops, what did I do wrong here? Well, that should work. It worked last night. Yay, demo. Something had to go wrong. So remote image references also work.
Jason, I think you got to add the app name.
Oh, app name, that's what it was. What did I, Deis apps, a vent. Thanks, Gabe, for the assist. And run vent. Okie doke. So relatively straightforward. All 3 workflows are now implemented and working on top of Kubernetes. So that's great. We're happy with the status of that. With respect to beta, we've got a few house cleaning things as we're reorganizing a few bits and pieces underneath. Those should be landing in the next couple of days, at which point everything will kind of settle down. We're also working on getting the workflow end-to-end tests for completeness, and then making sure that they're consistently green. And once that's happened, we'll be ready to cut a beta. And then the last bit is we've recently merged all the off-cluster storage stuff, so we're currently testing all of the various scenarios, both configurations on S3 as well as GCP plus Google Cloud Storage in S3 compatibility mode. So those are the things that the project's working on. I invite you to check it out. If you go to github.com/deis/workflow, you can see the main sort of project there with links to docs v2. So you can follow along the quick start guide there. So caveat emptor until we really cut beta, but we feel that everything's in a stable enough place that folks who want to kick the tires certainly feel free to do so. From a timeline perspective on the beta side, probably next week, sometime next week is what we're looking at. So, any questions? Cool. All right. With that, I will stop the share.
Great. Thanks, Jason. So, one other thing I want to mention is, it's probably going to be best for folks to wait until after the beta to start digging in and playing around with it. But if you are curious about fooling around, you can actually follow the quick start guide. There is a link that hopefully someone can drop in chat for the new V2 docs that has a quick start guide in there, and that quick start guide can facilitate you going through the process of getting Kubernetes cluster up, getting Helm installed, installing the Deis sort of in progress dev chart, and you can get one of these on your own Kubernetes cluster and start fooling around. Though with all the caveats that Jason mentioned. So great. Another thing I want to mention is sort of touching on community participation. One of the things that I've heard from speaking with a number of folks in the Deis community is people are interested in definitely getting closer and more of an update as to kind of the day-to-day progress as the project evolves. And we've been kind of evaluating a number of ways in which we could do that. The strengths of the day, with Deis has always been around the community. Over 160 contributors, disposition of really friendly folks, despite occasional trolls popping inappropriate images inside of a community hangout. I think folks have been pretty friendly and helpful generally. So we've been thinking about how do we level that up and really bridge, make the interactions between the core team working on the stuff and the community who's using it closer. And one specific thing I've heard from lots of folks is a Slack channel. And so what we have right now in the Deis users mailing list is a proposal about opening up a Deis community Slack, which will be populated by folks like yourselves, as well as the entire core team, sort of as a replacement for IRC. IRC has served us well to date. However, it does feel a bit arcane. I think it's a little difficult for everyone to get into IRC, and we see a lot of projects in our space moving to Slack, and we are using it ourselves internally to good effect. So it's kind of a good way to bring folks in the community kind of to where the core devs are. So I encourage you to weigh in on that issue, and if you have any other suggestions about things we might be able to do to better increase communication, including things like format for this meeting and other things you'd like to see, please speak up. So the last thing we want to do today was I want to go over a little overview of our CI infrastructure, because as Jason mentioned, a lot of what we're doing right now is sort of blocked on us getting our CI to a place where we're comfortable with the level of quality and automated testing that we have. So I'm going to hand it over to Seth at this point to allow him to show where we are with that. So give me one sec. I will try and securely allow Seth to share his screen.
I'm just checking. I'm checking this box, just pressing it, waiting to get permissions here.
Should be good.
Cool. All right. Can people see the screen? It should say Deis Workflows, Hardworking CI/CD Pipeline. All good? Give me a thumbs up. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So this is kind of what our pipeline looks like today. It's also a mixture of what a few of us want it to look like in the near future that will help us deliver things a little bit faster and quicker, from feature requests to code commit all the way to maybe like a canary build. So if you want to be on the cutting edge of everything all the time, these sets of new improvements should help us deliver that sort of thing for you. So where we usually start is repositories. So let's say for some reason the builder, the router, and the workflow component. Oh, one thing I should mention is one of the big things we made change-wise with V1 to V2 is the idea that we have all these components that could be used standalone or a mixture of some of them. And we don't have a single repository where you have to use all the components together. So we have this challenge of how do we create all these components with high quality individually, and then how do we package them all up together as a high quality Deis, what you expect with the legacy Deis workflow, git push, Deis pull sort of effect. So where we usually start is the repositories. Those repositories are hooked up to Travis builds. So this goes to a Travis build, and that's going to be behind. Anyway, I'll come back and show exactly those how those are connected. But GitHub, Travis builds master of those changes, and then we push the Docker image for that master build up to Quay right now. We also push to Docker Hub just in case either one comes down or we have people that request certain registry. And from there, then we have a Jenkins job that kind of sees that change and starts to pull some information about what the image that was just pushed. And then this Deis v2 EDE job in ci.deis.io is the main testing job that does some pretty crazy and awesome stuff for us. So first thing it does is it goes out to, right now, just Google Cloud Platform and spins us up a fresh Kubernetes cluster that we can deploy Deis on top of. After that, we use a tool that we wrote in-house called Helm to deploy all the manifests for RCs, services, all that jazz to that cluster. We end up with a Kubernetes cluster that has the most front-facing component, which would be the router, and the router is sending requests that come in from the outside to the builder component, the workflow component. And then we, after all that stuff is up and running, we use Helm again to actually install a pod that runs all of our EDE tests from within the cluster. So we deploy that pod to the same namespace as all these components, and then give it the router, the internal IP address for the router. You can also run these EDE tests from outside the cluster too, but we thought it was kind of neat. We could have everything running inside the cluster, everything in Docker containers. And then once that finishes, we get either, hey, the tests all ran, or something went wrong. And where we're going to get to once we get to this place of releasing beta is all of those components will have get SHA based tags. So we really know exactly what is in the cluster in terms of like AB5F of workflow, and another get SHA for builder, another get SHA for router. And so with our end-to-end test being kind of the gate that's checking for quality, the end-to-end test will say, okay, now update in our Deis chart repository what is the highest, what is past our test pipeline. So we could either update with new get SHA tags or do nothing and then wait for changes to come through each of those individual components until the test pass. So I kind of alluded to this earlier, but why do we want to do this? We have customers that want predictable releases on like maybe a month to 2 month scale. And then we also have people that either want to experiment with the latest features of Deis, or are really just that good in using the platform and want to stay with the latest and greatest technology that we're kind of building into the platform day to day. So any questions? I would suggest the questions drop into chat, and then we can go from there. Is that a good idea, Gabe?
Sounds good to me. Yeah, and just to follow on with what Seth was saying, with V2, we've talked about this a bit for those of you who've been in past meetings, but there's really two goals going forward. One is obviously we want to make sure we have the Deis V1 sort of end-to-end pass experience on the V2 platform, basically Deis on Kubernetes. But the other thing that we're very interested in is building smaller, more modular things. And that's part of the reason why we have these components in separate repos, which allows us to release and version, for example, our edge routing system separately. We already have folks in the wild who are using our edge routing to good effect without the rest of Deis, the folks who don't want git push builds, for example. So they don't have to run the controller, they can just run the router. So we need to be able to release that thing on its own life cycle. So that's part of the reason why, if you look at this, there's a lot more complexity here from an overall CI perspective versus what we had in V1. But there's a lot of good reason for that. We really do believe the future is in building modular pass components that add up to a sum total rather than building one big stack of stuff. So yeah, so I think there's been some activity in chat here. Let's see if there's some questions. So Oliver asked a question about will the contrib stuff be going away in V2, everything on Kubernetes? And the answer is yes, everything on Kubernetes for V2. We are going to be providing some opinions about how we recommend folks stand up a Kubernetes cluster. Those opinions are probably going to start out more with references to documentation, but over time, we're definitely interested in seeing how the community solves what we internally refer to as the zero to Kubernetes problem. How do you get a Kubernetes cluster from scratch? There's a lot of interesting work going on in the space, but I think there's an open question as to how much we have the ability to contribute to maintaining that stuff, because we really want to make sure that what we're recommending is truly production grade. We don't want to have configurations that are going to fall over. We want what folks are deploying to be able to be used in a prod environment. Bob, we'll have to get back to you on getting you a subject matter expert. See here. Jason Hansen put in a link to the documentation for V2 currently where that lives. I'm not sure if that's going to be the final resting place, probably not, but it's a good place to go check out for now. And some plus ones for Slack. Most people I've spoken to are in favor of Slack generally. I have mixed feelings about it. I think it'll be effective for us, but I do realize that it is proprietary, not open protocols, and there's some downside to that. But and I agree that Jason definitely does rock. Cool. Other questions from folks? No. All right. Great. Well, we are going to meet same place, same time next Thursday. First Thursday of the month, 11 a.m. Pacific, and by then we should almost certainly have a beta behind us, and hope to see you all there. Great. Thanks, everyone.